Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. Today we had the pleasure of interviewing Michael Garrison. He is a rising star in cycling. He placed in the top 25 in the Unbound Gravel 200 race, which is super competitive, and he gets it nutrition-wise. He understands the importance of the glucose and fructose ratio, he understands sodium, and he's also battled with disordered eating and the peloton, which is unfortunately a really huge problem. So without further ado, let's get started. You're in Girona. It's 7 o'clock at night, correct? Awesome. And I'm assuming you went out and trained today?
I did, yeah. Bit of a taper, so not too much. I have a pretty big race coming up next week, so did more training earlier in the week, and then easing things off a bit. Start traveling tomorrow. Just to Barcelona, spend the night, and then head to France on Monday. So, yeah.
Awesome. That's exciting. And what is the name of the race that you're going to be competing in?
The next race I do with this team is called Tour de Bretagne. It's in northeast France in Brittany. 7 days, 7 stages, 1,300 kilometers, and like 15,000 meters of elevation I think we're doing over this race. So all like nice. not big mountains, but just kind of grippy rolling hills. So yeah, it should be good.
That's awesome. So what is your ideal race course? Like if there was a perfect race for you, what would that look like?
I'm definitely in terms of the cycling world, I'm a bit of a heavier rider. So I'm looking at things more like some of the earlier spring races and in Belgium, the classic type races that are super hard, but generally power oriented. A bit less. I mean, power to weight is important in cycling, no matter where you go. But you have races where the peak numbers in the individual power curve is in terms of the raw powers stands out a bit more. And in terms of my type of rider, that's kind of what I'm focused on, as well as like time trials. I've always had that aerobic side, and have found some success from a younger age in the time trials. But yeah, feel like I'm slowly becoming a bit more versatile in terms of as you get older, your body kind of learns what's safe in terms of weight, in terms of like how lean you kind of get. And yeah, as I get older, I definitely feel like I'm becoming a bit more dynamic and flexible, and one that can, I mean, I'll never be climbing with the 55, 60 kilo guys, but, if you're doing enough power, you can get a bit closer. So, yeah.
So you said you were heavy. What is heavy for you? Or what do you mean heavy? Because I think heavy is relative in cycling, right?
Yeah, I mean the heavier guy. I mean, in cycling you can have guys up to. You'll have some guys that are very tall at 85 plus kilos. So 185, 190, 195 in pounds.
Sure.
And I'm kind of around 80, sometimes 78.
Okay.
That's my weight in kilos. So I don't really know it in pounds. But yeah.
We speak the kilo.
Yeah,
that's where I am.
My version of heavy is a little heavier. If I were ever to be competitive in cycling, it would be on the track in like a match sprint or something.
Very flat.
Yeah.
Flat.
So like I cover like 90 kilos. It's definitely sprinter type.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were mentioning that you feel like your body like is changing, and I think that a lot of people don't realize how powerful long-term athlete development is. Like you might start out with X amount of ability, but if you just keep with it year after year for 10 plus years, it's amazing how much the body can adapt and how much more you can do than you ever thought possible. So it's very cool.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And that was something we spoke about on the last episode I did with Brendan, and just how like you don't need to overcomplicate things in terms of training, especially I mean, I'm a bit of a more fortunate one, as I've been riding my bike since I was 10 years old. And you kind of get to the point that you really can trust the process and the patience in it. And it's definitely something special to have had that much time to let myself adapt, and to keep pushing. And it's exciting. So
it is. And honestly, even though you have been riding since you were 10, you still have so much time to get so much better too. So, I mean, honestly, like, who knows what you're going to be capable of 10 years from now, right? If you keep with it, you still love it. So it's very exciting.
definitely. Yeah, for sure.
When you've been riding for 10 years, how do you and you're thinking about long-term development, is cycling something that you love so much that you're like not worried about burnout at all? Or do you like do things in training or do things with the sport that kind of help you stay fresh and keep it fun? Like, do you do anything intentional, or is it just you love it so much that you just will love it forever no matter what?
It's funny because there's been ups and downs in terms of my progression, my mental connection to the sport as I've gotten older. I mean, I remember going into my second year junior. So when I was 17 and 18, I did a lot of racing with the U.S. national team, a lot of time in Europe, and we were good. Like we were very good. But when you have a lot of really strong guys, there's pressure. And I mean, we ended up as a team, one of our guys won the world championship and went on, he's racing in the world tour now. And I'm the type of person that puts a lot of pressure on myself. And that year, I was racing well from the spring, had won some races in the States, like a podium in nationals. I mean, like a solid year. Won a few things in Europe, but was also like, I was always kind of like 1% behind these other US guys that were also winning. Sure. And as we were coming up into the world championships, like we were really focused, but the person that I was a bit focused less on the training and more on kind of how hard the course at Worlds was and how light I could get and how skinny I could get. And yeah, I got real skinny, definitely too skinny into that second half of the season. And after that, I kind of definitely did some hormonal damage, getting that light, and maybe a bit of long-term metabolic damage as well. Because we were so good, we put a lot of pressure on each other as well as pressure on ourselves. But coming into the big goals of the season, I mean, my first year as a junior, I was top 10 at the World Championships in the time trial, and that was a big target for the year. But with all that pressure and a bit of focus on the wrong things and thinking about the course, and we were doing some races in Switzerland before Worlds, and I got really skinny. Definitely. I mean, at 18, I got way too skinny. I mean, I would step on the scale maybe three times a day, like, you know, stressing about everything. My sleep quality went off a cliff. There was definitely some hormonal effects, and I went into that World Championships and I raced a TT, and in the middle, my body was empty. And I mean, I was way off anything I was hoping for. And after that, I was like, we still had the road race, but I was tuned out, and I was like, I don't care. Like, I had kind of flipped the switch. I wasn't thinking about every last calorie I was eating. And it was funny because when I turned myself off, then I went and raced the road race and had one of the best races I've had. I mean, but after that, I was definitely still struggling. Mentally, I mean, I really kind of dug myself a hole there, but I bounced back, and you learn from those ups and downs, over time, over the years. And, in terms of my looking 10 years ahead, I think because I've had some pretty tough times in the sport, COVID year, I mean, that year as a junior, 2 years ago, I was working with a strength coach and put on a little too much muscle and came into the season a little too heavy. And when you're straight into the thick of it with the best guys in the world, like, it just doesn't cut it. And,
Right.
So you learn from each end of the spectrum, and I've definitely had a slower progression in terms of when I compare myself to other guys my age. I mean, the guys I was racing with at that age as a junior are in the world tour now, but it's not something that bothers me, or I'm not one for comparison. I really only focus on my personal growth, and I still feel like there are no boundaries, which excites me. And you have these days where you might be on the bike, whether it's power testing or a day that things are just clicking and you're really pushing, and say you might be doing the numbers, but the weight isn't perfect. Like, the weight isn't right there. But in terms of looking down the road, like, stuff like that can just excite you, because as you become older and more knowledgeable and more experienced with more individuals around you than, say, team staff, stuff like that, then your personal community that are all aiming for your success grows, and then you become better. And so for me, having seen some of those snapshots of what's possible, and I know now I'm still far from perfect, but I think in general, all I have is just excitement for what's to come. So,
Nice.
yeah.
That's awesome. There are a couple of things that you mentioned that I loved. One, that you're not interested in comparing yourself to other people, because sometimes, what they're doing really isn't necessarily relevant to what you need, right? Like, what your body needs to be the best that you can be might not be what, somebody else needs. So I love that. And I did have a question. When you said, I think you said, when I turned myself off, then you had a great road race. Is that what you said, or did I hear that incorrectly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I had spent months focusing on everything I put in my body. And but in general, it was how little I could put in my body and still, I don't know. I was barely functioning, to be honest. Like, I wasn't hitting really into my training. Like, the numbers were generally going down, but I was convinced in my head that watts per kilo was going up. So to me, that I don't know, you definitely lose yourself. Yeah. And the day after that time trial, I think we had 2 days before the road race, and you don't care anymore. And I was having, I don't know, like going for the pizza, or having some ice cream, or having a lot of ice cream, or just not.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking. And like, my brain just finally relaxed. And it probably finally had energy to relax as well. And maybe I had maybe told myself that, like, I don't know if I want to race anymore. But from that point, because I had just kind of let go of trying to be perfect and letting myself be okay with my internal perception of failure, which was not eating Brussels sprouts and Greek yogurt for breakfast. Like, then, I don't know. I just, all of a sudden I was flying. And it's wild, the control that kind of your brain has over your body. But yeah, all ends of the spectrum. So, and only excitement for the future.
Yes, absolutely. No, I mean, I think that's amazing. I love the way that you phrase that, like turn your brain off and just let yourself be like free of that burden of pressure, all that pressure, and just let your body do what it knew how to do. I love that. That's great. And it's so easy to fall into that trap, of thinking that, oh my gosh, my watts per kilo, that's everything. Like, I'm not going to be able to make it up this climb if I don't lose, half a kilo. I mean, but truthfully, like that, I mean, it's definitely a double-edged sword. You don't want to be too heavy, of course, but you also don't want to be starving yourself to the point where your psychology is terrible. You're hating your life, essentially. So.
Yeah. And there's definitely points where, I mean, I've had you kind of hit these little small periods where you might be training a lot. And like, even last week, we'd come off a 4-day race in France. It was one of the biggest energy expenditure races I'd done, in terms of the terrain. I mean, it was very up and down, and all the climbs they were steep climbs. So you're really like high power outputs there, short recovery, long days. And, I was wrecked after this race. I don't think I've ever been in such a hole, and you kind of come off that and just trying to find myself. And I'm really focused on, this was last week, really focused on, I like to focus on cooking and, have that occupy my mind at times. But so I came off this race and kind of just to occupy the headspace to get myself moving, but not too focused on the bike. I'm like really focused on cooking, healthy, wholesome things that excite me. But even after a week like that, I was eating very nutrient dense foods, whole foods. But what's so interesting about the sport is I was eating very, very healthy, but I look back on it and the recovery definitely felt delayed. And just because you're coming off a very large caloric deficit, basically, and even sometimes the meals that are defined as healthy, in terms of the very high performance world, it's just not enough. And it took me a while to recover still. Even though you're like, oh, look at this beautiful bowl that I made with all these colors and it satisfies your brain and all, but, it took time still. And that's another interesting thing about the sport is just, there's times that you feel like you think you're okay, but honestly, your brain just sometimes needs more calories to speed up those metabolic processes and even the hormone processes and stuff like that. And you don't even realize it when you're there. And then maybe you eventually get to a point that you're like, something's wrong. And then have a massive bowl of rice or something and really up the carbohydrate. And then the next day you're like, all right, I'm back. or it might even take longer. But yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing how sometimes your brain will, cue into the wrong things or the things that might be healthy for more regular people being people who aren't on their bike 5-6 hours a day. Focusing on the color and the nutrient density and things that are generally considered super healthy, super high fiber content. But maybe that's not the most important thing for you at the time, but it's really easy to not focus on, well, I mean, sometimes you have to consume 4 digits of carbohydrates in a day to fuel well, but it's that to normal people, that is an unhealthy thing to do. But as an athlete, you're not normal.
Yeah. Definitely.
So can you tell me a little bit about your consumption while training?
Yeah. Generally, it's in terms of when I'm on the bike. I'm still young, and I still, there's still stones to be turned. But I've experimented with maltodextrin and fructose in terms of a 2-to-1. I would weigh out, I think, what was it? Like 80 grams maltodextrin, 40 grams fructose per bottle. So that would be like, I'm not too specific, but I know because my outputs are really high, I always want to be at 90 grams an hour. And oftentimes I'm up to 120. And there's days that I'm just like, I just want to see how much I can take in and almost see if I can bother my gut. And I've had more, I've had more gut issues in racing with a product we use than I've ever had in training using sucrose. We have these 40 gram. So like in races, I'll generally have, it's a bit tough because I honestly prefer it in training, because in racing you have a team, and the staff, we have soigneurs and staff doing feeds on the road, feeds from the car, but not all the guys want 80 grams in their bottles. I'm generally one of the only ones that, like, the other guys are a bit smaller and maybe want 40 or 60 in the, I think all our bottles have 40. I'll ask for 80. And then if we have a 20 gram gel and a 40 gram gel, and I've had stomach problems with the 40 gram gel. I'm not sure what's in it. But I think the mix is a 2-to-1. And so I'll do like a bottle an hour with either like a 20 gram gel every 20 minutes or a 40 gram gel. But in training, I mean, I've used sucrose. I'll put I'll even put 120 grams in a 500 ml bottle, which is like thick, and it's like, it's sweet. And then some people can't handle it. But just 2 days ago, me and some buddies did a pretty long, like 5-hour coast ride, kept it pretty chill, like mid-low zone 2 heart rate. And the other guys, one of the guys I live with, like, didn't eat anything in the first 3 hours. And again, we're riding, like, we're trained athletes, and so you can ride 3 hours with no intake. But I was certainly not. I was not doing that. And we stopped in this little coast town at hour 3, and that's the one problem I have had is I'll lose track of my hydration and think I'm still a bit low on calories rather than just water in the body, and salts. I'm a salty sweater. And I mean, I just bought 1.5 liters bottled water, and, the classic, you get like some Oreos or something when you stop in the middle of a ride, because we couldn't find a cafe, and just killed the water, like drank the whole water. And then I had brought a Ziploc bag with more sugar, more sucrose, and I topped off my next 2 bottles, and I had, checked my hydration middle of the ride, like, and then the fuel's on top, like you're on top of your fueling. And then the next day I had, I think me and my roommate had like a similar dinner or something. And the next day he was just wrecked. Like, he was completely wrecked. And I'm like going out for, I had 3.5 hours that day. I had like a higher zone 2, closer to a tempo. And like I felt great. And he took a day off. But you gotta be ahead of the game.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much how I'm feeling. It's high. And it's definitely wild looking back at when I was younger, and I had switched coaches in 2021. No, going into 2022, I started with a new coach, and he is a younger guy named Elliot Baring out of Georgia, and he really emphasized to me the importance of fueling. And I remember one of my first rides that I was riding with maybe 70 grams in my bottles, and I just remember like how in shock I was and how in awe of how good I felt on my bike. And you're fueling your brain as well, and like you never get really grumpy, and you're like, I like to listen to music, and the music sounds good, and yeah, I mean everything is in terms of hormone balance as well. Like I feel like it's easy as a high performance athlete to get in a much larger deficit than you think, and your body just slows down. At least that's what I've experienced. And it's not like, oh, so you're in a 3,000 calorie deficit. Like you're not just going to lose a pound of body fat. Like your body's going to slow down, and you're probably going to wake up the next day feeling like absolute garbage. So it's been a really cool progression from a young age where like the one Cliff Bar an hour was like the thing, like maybe some electrolytes in the bottles, and like I'll take the 1 bar an hour was kind of the rule. And then, it's been a big progression. So it's exciting as well.
That's awesome. I love the fact that you said, or you mentioned something about like trying to upset the gut, like pushing the limits so hard in your fueling to see if you could cause GI distress. Because if you can fuel that hard, that means you're basically enhancing your performance that much more. So I love that. Because I mean, it's true. Your brain uses glucose, for its main fuel source, and you're replenishing glycogen, and I mean, it's so important. And you're absolutely right when you said that you will feel so much better if you feel like it's your job, like it's as important as your workouts. So, yeah, a lot of really great key points that you brought up just now.
It is really interesting too. You mentioned that like you think, okay, if I'm in this like big deficit because I rode a ton of calories today, and you're in a kcal deficit, you like it's easy to think that I'll just lose some fat tissue and it'll be as simple as that. But it's like we're not cars, we're not like machines. Our bodies are super complex, and when you try to strip away the fat by just being in a deficit, like there's a million complex processes that happen that affect your psychology, and those things also affect your physiology. And so your body's like revolting in every way possible because you're literally like trying to get it to die when you starve it like that. So it's like, your body revolts big time.
True. Yes. That's awesome. And then when you said you put like 120 grams of carbs or like from sucrose in your 500 ml bottle, do you have like a separate water bottle to like chase that like concentrate with, or like what's your strategy on that?
No. I generally the thing with the training, with the riding around here, is there's a lot of fountains. And so it's very easy to like, I'll start with two bottles, 120 grams in each. And I'll generally I'll start the ride hydrated and drink a bunch of water in the morning. And generally I'll try to get one down in the first hour. And then from there, like I might fill that empty one with water. So it's almost like this 1 carb bottle, then I fill the second one with water, and then I'm like going for the other carb bottle and fill that one with water. And then I'll like get some more water, and then add like I always bring like a little Ziploc bag. if the training is longer, 3, 4, 5 hours. But not every day is perfect, but I'm never finishing a session like destroyed. And that's a big thing I really emphasize nowadays is when you are fueled, you're going to be able, like, if you're properly fueling all your training, you're going to be able to hit your numbers, like, in terms of your personal threshold, your personal outputs. But almost finishing to where you're still fueled, you haven't completely emptied yourself, like you're going to be able to recover much better. Even still feel like I used to live in this attitude that I should finish a session and then I should just be wrecked, like, out of energy, probably like, okay, I finished the session. Like now I ride the 30 minutes home. Like I don't need to fuel now. Like they're just a complete wrong kind of negative mindset approach. And nowadays, like you get excited for sessions because the legs are going to want to turn because the body has what it needs. And I think that's really, there's kind of two different mindsets in the professional sports world that at least I feel like I've seen. And there's the more kind of negative approach of everybody has an eating disorder. Like you have to get as light as possible. Like they shouldn't be fun. And then there's the much more positive oriented, like fueling the sessions, enjoying the training, getting excited for the racing because you've had quality stimulus from the training. And it's kind of old school, new school. So it will definitely be interesting to see where the sport goes as well.
I have so many questions about that sort of like thinking in the peloton, like, and the logistics as an athlete. You're an individual, but you're on a team. It's a team sport, and you have teammates that might be doing different things than you or thinking different things than you. And you have maybe like Sonia's nutrition coaches or team coaches that might have an approach that they think is best for the team as a whole. I would like to hear more about that dynamic. Like what sort of, like, if you said, can I make my bottles? Like, is that a thing that happens? Like, or are they just like, no, we make your bottles. You can ask for what you want and we'll try to get you what you need.
It's, in the races, some of the guys make their own bottles. But it's generally like they only start with those bottles. And that's okay. But our team is the staff is leans towards the more old school side.
Sure.
Like we had a training camp in Italy this year. We were there for 2 weeks. A lot of endurance, but also a fair bit of intensity in the training. And one day we were doing inside. There's a protocol called inside testing that we do. And it's a 20 second, a 3 minute, a 6 minute, and a 12-minute test, full gas. And you stay seated in the saddle. And it's tough. Like it's a tough, very tough session. And I mean, for some of us, we're pushing.
Anything full gas is tough.
Yeah.
Let's just,
and
especially in that 3, 6, 12. Like, my God, it's brutal.
In the saddle too, like the whole time. Nice.
But there's a lot of very interesting numbers that come out of this test.
It's amazing that you guys test that very regularly. That sounds terrible.
It's not too regular, but just to the kind of the point I'm making is we were doing some hard days at camp, and on the days that we had efforts, one of the Swan years we got one gel, and he would put it on our bikes. Yeah,
that was the whole. Oh my.
Wow.
I mean, we had bars, and the bars were 40-gram bars. But but they weren't like they definitely caused us some digestive issues in terms of later in the day.
Yeah.
But there was definitely no emphasis in terms of the emphasis that, like, the approach that you guys have. It wasn't close to that. In terms of really fueling the session. It's definitely, and I mean, our directors were talented professionals in the 2000s, but things are also changing as well. But it can be hard to kind of tell them that fueling
navigating the landscape of that sort of thing is really, really challenging. When we've both been on national teams, like been on sort of the pro team environment, and it can be crazy challenging to say what you need. Especially if you're not the norm, if you don't fit the team preference, it can be really hard. So and if you need to cut anything out of this video for YouTube's sake or for team politics, we can definitely do that.
We understand the struggle.
Social media management is huge when you're on a team. So we get that.
But nowadays in the racing, we have our unlimited, like, we can take as many gels as we want. But for racing, we do have our choice of product. In terms of one brand, we can use some of our own stuff. Some guys use some of their own stuff. We're not restricted to one company, but the team provides, and when they like what they provide, we have unlimited, like, in terms of quantity for a race day. But still, it can still be difficult when you're racing. It's just not quite the same when you're always stressing the peloton, turning, sprinting, stuff like that for 4 or 5 hours. But not every day is perfect, and some days you might feel perfectly, and other days, or some days you might feel perfectly, and other guys in the peloton won't, and other days you might not feel perfectly, and and it's just a balance, and you have so many race days, but always striving for excellence again is the goal, and that is improved with the proper fueling plan. So
How do you set out an hourly target? Like, do you tell your team, like, I'm going to try to target 80 grams an hour or 120 grams an hour or more or less? Do you have anything quantitative like that with the team so they know what's coming?
With the team, no. Generally, everybody has a personal idea of what they want. I think some of the smaller guys are shooting more for 90. But for example, in the last race, I started with 2 bottles that were 80 gram bottles. And then before the race, we have a team meeting. We look at the profile on this program called Velo Viewer, and we know where the feed zones are going to be. And I'll generally approach the staff, and like on one day I approached the staff and was like, at this feed, can I take a musette, like a bag with 2 more bottles? And that was probably 2 hours into the race. And so I had started 280s on the bike at kilometer 92 or 93. I finished with these 2. I'm taking 2 more 80s. And then from there, if I take 1 gel an hour, like 120 gram gel, I'm still at 100 grams an hour, which is, we're not racing full, like, you're not full gas all day, which is another thing about road cycling, is like, there might be days that the brake goes and you ride at 100 watts for an hour, 2 hours, even. Like, I mean, every race is different. And so having that 80 baseline for me is perfect. And then, yeah, I had the staff with the extra 2. I had maybe 6 or 8 gels with me, and I was doing, like it was. I had a good day on the bike. I mean, in terms of my type of rider, in terms of a race that challenge, like it was. I think we had almost 3,000 vertical meters that day, and just to be there is like you gotta be feeling well. And
Yes.
and also just how you feel mentally after the stage, how your body feels. Like you might be physically tired, but you're not kind of mentally broken because your body was running off fuel, not running off like cortisol and stress hormone. So yeah, that's kind of what works for me.
That's awesome.
Sweet.
I have a question. So let's say you're doing a training ride, you're not with your team, or you're just riding with a few teammates, but it's not a race situation, and you're using sucrose in your bottle. You mentioned that you're a salty sweater. Is that what you said? You said you're a salty sweater?
Yeah.
What would do you ever like add any sort of like sodium or salts to your drink, or do you just kind of do this water and the sucrose?
I do add salt. I don't really, I'll just use table salt. And I've never had my sweat rate measured. I've seen other guys that have had it measured. And I mean, one of the guys I lived with last year, his dad was a, professional Ironman guy in the 90s. He's now the chief referee for Ironman. And, he had his measured, and his sweat rate was something like, I think 3,000 milligrams per hour when he's really sweating, 3,000 or 4,000 something. So 3 to 4 grams an hour. And my brother was the same way. And I'm in hot days, we always get salt stains on the jersey, on the bibs. And so I just we have a salt shaker, and I'll have it on the scale, because I use the scale to measure out the sucrose. And I mean, if it doesn't have milligrams, it just has grams, but generally I'm not too stressed about it, but I'm always putting salts in my bottles as well. So maybe 2. No, I think I'll do one, so 1,000 milligrams per bottle. So it's a sweet, salty mix, but yeah, works for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? It's a great strategy. We do that too.
That's awesome. Yeah. Do your teammates look at you like you're crazy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sweet.
Sometimes.
When you mentioned taking baggies with you, sometimes to refill, you take a certain amount in your first bottle or two, and then you drink through that, fill up water. Eventually, it gets dilute or whatever. You take a baggie and you're gonna fill up. Do you measure each baggie? Do you take multiple baggies? How does that work for you? And I'm asking because I hate baggies. I hate dealing with them, and I know a guy who just founded a company they're going to produce essentially bricks, solid bricks that you just plop in your bottle. I think it's called fuel rods, but it's basically just, instead of dealing with powder, you're dealing with bricks, and it dissolves immediately. And it's just an easier way solving that baggie problem. But I want to hear about how you do the baggies. Yeah. Is it measured per bag? How do you do that?
So generally, if I have a 4 hours training, and not being too specific, but I'll approach that training like 400 grams. If I take in 400 grams in a 4-hour ride, I'm happy. 400 grams of carbohydrate, but most often I'll weigh the first 2 bottles that are going on the bike on the scale at 120 with salt. And then I'll just take one pretty small Ziploc bag, and like put that on the scale, and I'll just like, I mean, it's not perfect, but I'll just weigh that. I'll put it all into one bag. And whether it's 200 or, if I'm ambitious, 240, just in that one. And it's like a pretty narrow bag. And then it's kind of interesting because I go out training and like in my pockets, I have like phone, keys, hand pump, and then just like a bag. And like, I generally don't really take solid food. Yeah. I generally like, I mean, sometimes I'll take like some little biscuits or something just to, have that feeling of snacking on something. And then again, it's not perfect. Like I'll just pour, when I'm stopping to fill up the bottles, I'll pour, what looks like half.
Sure.
Maybe I could even like draw a line on the bag, like with a Sharpie to weigh it out. But when I approach the end of the training, I'm kind of looking if I've gotten through that, then I'm doing okay. And I can also just tell with how I feel. If you finish the ride and you still have energy, and you generally like shouldn't feel that tired. If you're more in a zone 2 session, and I mean, with intensity, I can understand a bit more, but if you still have the ability to approach the rest of your day like a normal person, then I know I've fueled well. So
that's a good,
yeah,
I think that's a good benchmark. Can I approach the rest of my day like a normal person? I think that is a really actually good benchmark for if you're feeling well, for sure.
It really is. Yeah. If you're not feeling well, you feel like rough the rest of the day. Like I'm just going to have to lie down for the rest of the day. Yeah. That's a really good way to look at it. Have you ever been in a long training session or like post race where you really felt like faint, like you were going to need to like lie down on the side of the road or anything like that? Or you just felt so awful that you weren't going to make it?
There's no lying allowed here.
There's no. I've been there, so I'm just, no shame if that's the case.
Yeah. No, I definitely. I mean, even if I can't pinpoint some exactly, but I've also definitely had days where I really feel the kind of hormonal, emotional response that certainly I'm not the doctor here, but my assumption is that comes from a large deficit. For example, this last race, like we'd had a late flight, and I mean, we flew back from France, straight after the last stage, got in, like didn't get back to Girona till 2 or 3 in the morning. And then, I had 2 easy days, but like you go out I went out for a spin on the gravel bike on Monday, and I was just not having a good time whatsoever. And my brain definitely goes to these weird, more emotional states for sure. And it's been a really long time since I've had a true bonk. And maybe just because with so much time on the bike, like I'm a bit more fat adapted. Like I've never really had like a heavy bonk in a long time. Even there's times that I even know I'm more depleted, but I can kind of still go. But the emotional side is definitely my bigger like tuning fork of how my energy stores are, especially with relationships and like even just how you're responding to your roommates, and how much you're smiling, how much you're laughing, stuff like that.
Yes.
It's all super valid, because a lot of times, like, you get guys that live alone and they probably end up in an underfueled state, but they never realize it. And then when they do go hang out with people, they're probably pretty grumpy, or they don't want to go invest in relationships, because, the mental energy is just truly not there. And it's not like they didn't sleep enough or anything. It's like your body needs more fuel. And through meditation and true reflection and writing, like, I really try to hone in on that emotional state, because for me, it's the emotional state that really plays into, and I really realize how, like, the energy balance that my body's in. Again, I'm not always perfect, and there's times that I'm probably there, but I don't accept it and don't realize it.
Totally.
Yeah.
But emotions are huge. They're everything, at least in my eyes. So.
Completely agree. I mean, if you're not in the right emotional state, like, you can start doubting why you're even out there. I mean, and on the flip side, if your emotions are in the right place, like, you can just tear some legs off. So, I mean, makes a huge difference in how you move. And obviously off the bike, it can make or break the quality of your life too. So
I would like to end on that as the final piece for our viewers, because I think that's so important, and I think it's so underestimated, how much the emotions around training and in training are important, and also how they affect your, like, real world life. Mm-hmm. That's tremendous. Mm-hmm. And we've taken at least more than an hour of your time, so just really grateful to have had you join us. And it's amazing how much you align with what we do, so that's super cool too. We're excited about that.
We're a fan.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it as well, and would surely love to keep in touch.
Yeah,
that would be awesome. Sure.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on. I really appreciate it.
We really appreciate your time. Sleep well, fuel well, and have an awesome race in the next one. We wish you the best.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day as well. See you guys soon.
Thank you. You will. See you later.
Bye-bye.